The Riley house had always been considered exemplary among its neighbors on Springfield's quiet Maple Street. The two-story mansion, with its immaculately manicured lawn and freshly painted white fence, epitomized the American dream. Behind the perfect facade, however, was a very different reality. Trevor Riley ran his fingers over the coffee machine's touchpad, adjusting the strength of the drink for the fourth time that morning. The dark circles under his eyes gave away his sleepless night. He glanced furtively at his wife, who sat at the kitchen island, engrossed in her laptop and not even noticing his presence. "Working again?" he asked, trying to hide the irritation in his voice. Zoe Riley barely took her eyes off the screen. Her long brown hair was carelessly gathered into a bun, and her face bore no trace of the bright makeup she'd applied every day until 6 months ago, when they'd both worked in offices. "I have a deadline in 2 days," she replied dryly. "The client is demanding the third version of the design now. If I don't turn it in on time, the contract falls through." Trevor took a sip of overly hot coffee and grumbled. Lately, all their conversations had been reduced to such exchanges of information, dry, businesslike, devoid of any emotional intimacy. "I've got a meeting to get to by 9, he said, glancing at his watch. "Chrysler is considering our project as a priority. If approved, it could mean a promotion." Zoe nodded, but Trevor was sure she hadn't even heard his words. Their marriage, once full of hopes and plans, now resembled a cohabitation agreement between two near strangers. Adjusting his tie in front of the hallway mirror, Trevor remembered how they had met in their 3rd year of university. Zoe had been a bright, creative person who had won him over with her spontaneity and energy. He, an ambitious student of economics, saw in her what he always lacked: the ability to enjoy the moment, to see the beauty in small things. They got married right after graduation, despite the objections of their parents, who thought they were too young. The first 2 years seemed perfect: a new house, career prospects, plans to have children in 5 years. And then the pandemic happened, turning their lives upside down. Working remotely from home, in which Zoe, as a freelancer, adapted easily, for Trevor became a real challenge. The lack of a clear distinction between work and personal life turned their life together into an endless series of stressful everyday life. When the restrictions were lifted, Trevor was relieved to be back in the office. But Zoe, having received a lucrative contract with a design firm, preferred to stay on remote work. Gradually, an invisible wall of reticence, resentment, and mutual grievances grew between them. "I'm leaving," Trevor threw, already standing at the door. Only an inarticulate "uh-huh" came in response. Another busy day awaited him at the office. Regional manager for Midwest Development on the 32nd floor of a glass business center in downtown Springfield sounded solid, but in reality meant endless reports, presentations, and client meetings, most of which never turned into actual contracts. "Riley, you look lousy," Gordon, his immediate supervisor, remarked as Trevor finished preparing for a presentation. "Problems at home?" "No, sir, nothing's wrong, just a lack of sleep." "Look me. Everything has to go perfectly today. Chrysler is our ticket to the big leagues." As Trevor frantically checked the presentation slides, his phone vibrated. A message from Dexter. "How about Friday? Poker at my house, 8 p.m. Trevor smiled for the first time all day. Dexter Walsh had been his best friend since high school. Even though their paths had diverged, Dexter had owned a small auto repair shop instead of college. They'd maintained their friendship. Walsh was the only person Trevor could tell about his problems with Zoe. "I will," he replied. The presentation went surprisingly smoothly, but Trevor didn't experience the satisfaction he'd hoped for. Instead, he felt empty, as if reaching professional heights had lost its meaning. Who was he to brag about his success to? Zoe, who lately seemed to be living in a parallel reality. Returning to his office after lunch, he opened his mail and found a letter from the bank notifying him that a large sum had been debited from their joint account. Trevor frowned. $400 for some design course? He didn't remember Zoe ever talking about it. In fact, she hadn't shared much of her plans with him at all in recent months. At home, he was in for another unpleasant surprise. As he entered the kitchen, he heard his wife's laughter coming from her upstairs study. A sincere, resounding laugh that he hadn't heard in what seemed like forever. Trevor froze at the foot of the stairs, listening. No, are you serious? Zoe's voice sounded playful, almost flirtatious. That's the most ridiculous story I've heard all week. A male voice replied something unintelligible, and Zoe laughed again. Something shivered inside Trevor. He walked up the stairs and stopped at the door to his wife's office. Zoe was sitting in front of a computer with a video call open on the screen. The caller was a young man about their age, with a trendy haircut and wearing a stylish shirt. "Oh, hi," Zoe noticed her husband, and there was an instant change in her face. The smile disappeared and her voice became subdued. "You're early today." "Who's that?" Trevor nodded toward the screen. "Vincent Marsh, my new art director," Zoe replied, "discussing a project." The man on the screen waved a hand in greeting. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Riley. Heard about you from Zoe." "Likewise," Trevor replied dryly, though he was sure his wife had never mentioned the man in her conversations with him. "I won't interfere with your project discussion." He left the room feeling a strange feeling, a mixture of irritation and anxiety. Why didn't Zoe ever laugh like that with him? What had they actually talked about before he came in? Over dinner, which they ate in tense silence, Trevor finally asked, "So what was that design course you spent $400 on?" Zoe froze with fork in hand. "Are you checking my expenses?" "No, just got a notice from the bank. It's a joint account, in case you forgot. It's an intensive on a new graphics program, needed for work. And you couldn't discuss it with me first? Should I have?" A note of challenge appeared in Zoe's voice. "I earned that money, Trevor, and I spent it on my professional development, not shopping." "It's not the money, it's the fact that you're not telling me anything," he objected, "nor about your new art director." "Vincent? What was I supposed to say? That I have a new boss?" "Judging by your cheerfulness, you like him a lot more than a boss." Zoe set her fork aside. "Are you serious now? You're jealous of the man I work with via video link? I haven't seen you laughing and having so much fun with me in months. Maybe because you come home with a sour face and the only thing you can talk about is your damn job and the problems at it?" Trevor felt the anger building up inside. "At least I'm not flirting with my coworkers." "I wasn't flirting. We're just having normal conversations, like people, you know? Human companionship. Remember that? The stuff that's gone between us." At that moment, Zoe's cell phone rang. She glanced at the screen and quickly dropped the call. "Who is it?" Trevor asked. "The number's unidentified." "Really? Then why did you reset so quickly?" "Jesus, Trevor." Zoe jumped up from the table. "You're insufferable. I'm not going to make excuses for every call and every action. If you want an accounting, keep a spreadsheet of my calls, moves, and expenses." She ran out of the kitchen, leaving him alone in front of the unfinished dinner. That night, Trevor couldn't sleep. He lay on his side of the bed, listening to his wife's measured breathing and wondering when exactly they had begun to drift apart. Had it been a gradual cooling, or had it all happened at a specific moment that he had missed? The next morning, the tension between them only increased. Zoe defiantly ignored his presence, having been immersed in her work since dawn. Trevor silently packed up and left for the office. It had been a hectic day. The news that Chrysler had approved their project had excited the whole department. Colleagues offered to celebrate the event in a bar after work, but Trevor refused, referring to business at home. Instead, he decided to stop by Dexter's. Walsh & Sons Auto Service was located on the outskirts of the city, in an industrial area. When Trevor arrived, Dexter was tinkering with the engine of an old Ford. "You look lousy, bro," he observed, wiping his hands with an oily rag. "Trouble with Zoe again?" Trevor nodded and they walked into a small office where Dexter pulled 2 bottles of beer from the fridge. "She's distancing herself from me," Trevor admitted. "She's got some new coworker she's constantly in touch with. Laughs with him, flirts with him." "Are you sure she's flirting?" Dexter took a sip of beer. "Maybe you're just getting yourself worked up?" "I know my wife. She never acts like that with me." "Look." Dexter leaned closer. "If you really suspect something, why don't you check? Her phone, her computer. Are you suggesting I spy on my own wife? Call it what you want, but it's better to know the truth than to be plagued by suspicion, right?" When Trevor got home, Zoe was still working in her office. He went upstairs and stopped at the door, listening. No talking or laughter. He peeked cautiously into the room. Zoe was working on some kind of design layout, completely immersed in the process. That night, he had a strange dream. Zoe and some man, he couldn't see his face, were standing on the shore of the lake, laughing as they watched Trevor drowning. He woke up in a cold sweat with his heart pounding. On Friday, Trevor decided to test his suspicions. He told Zoe that he had an important meeting with a client and would be staying late. In fact, he planned to come home earlier than usual and see what his wife was doing in his absence. The day dragged on interminably. Trevor couldn't concentrate on his work. His thoughts kept returning to Zoe and her mysterious art director. What if Dexter was right? What if there really is something between them? At 4 p.m, he told the receptionist he wasn't feeling well and left the office. On the way home, a strange sense of determination gripped him. Today, he would learn the truth, no matter how bitter it turned out to be. Parking his car 2 blocks away from his house, Trevor walked slowly down the quiet street, pondering each step. The afternoon sun was slipping toward the horizon, painting the neat facades of the houses a golden color. His mouth was dry, and a bad feeling was heavy in his chest. He'd never done anything like this before, never stalked his own wife, never crept up to his own house like a thief. Their 2-story mansion appeared around the corner. Zoe's car was in the driveway, which meant she was home. Trevor stood still for a moment, looking at the house they'd picked out together 3 years ago. They'd had grand plans then: kids, house parties, weekend barbecues with neighbors. All the things that beckoned them to this quiet Springfield suburb. Where did it all go? When did their life together become 2 parallel existences under one roof? Instead of the front door, Trevor headed toward the backyard. The gate was unlocked. Zoe always forgot about it, despite his constant reminders. He walked carefully into the garden, careful to tread on the grass so as not to rustle the gravel of the path. As he approached the house, he noticed that the kitchen window was ajar. A light breeze ruffled the curtain, and through the gap he could hear voices coming from upstairs. Zoe's voice sounded unaccustomedly animated. "No, I mean it. I've never felt anything like this." Her laughter, so rare in recent months, cut at Trevor's heart. If only we'd met earlier. A male voice answered something, but Trevor couldn't make out the words. He silently opened the back door with his spare key and slipped into the house. The kitchen was a mess. An open package from a cooked meal, an unfinished glass of wine, crumbs from something sweet. Zoe never drank during the day. Trevor froze at the foot of the stairs, listening. The voices sounded clearer now. "You know it's wrong," said a man in whom Trevor recognized Vincent's voice. "But damn it, I can't stop thinking about you, every single day." "Me neither," Zoe replied quietly. "Sometimes I feel like our conversations are the only thing keeping me afloat. At home, I'm suffocating. It's like the walls are closing in. He doesn't appreciate you." "It's not that. We've lost touch. It's like living with a stranger." Trevor felt a chill run down his spine. Had he become so estranged from Zoe that she thought of him as a stranger? Or was it just an excuse to avoid feeling guilty for emotional betrayal? He walked up the stairs, trying not to step on the creaking steps. The door to Zoe's office was ajar, and the soft light of a desk lamp poured in from there. "If only things could be changed," Vincent continued. "God, Zoe, I want to see you. For real. Not through a screen. I know, I do too, but it's complicated." "Because of him?" "Partly. I don't know, though. Trevor and I haven't really been together for a long time. Physically, yes, but not emotionally." Trevor felt as if he'd been punched under the breath. Physically? What did she mean by that? "When was the last time you two were intimate?" Vincent's voice sounded intimate, with a note of possessiveness that infuriated Trevor. "I don't remember. Maybe a month ago? He comes home exhausted. I'm always on deadlines. I don't really feel like it." "What about me?" Trevor stepped closer, no longer stealthy. What he saw made him freeze in place. Zoe was sitting in front of a computer screen, but this was no ordinary work call. She was wearing the lace bra Trevor had given her last Christmas, which she'd never worn for him. Her hair was loose, her lips were painted, and she held a glass of wine in her hand. On the screen, Vincent, with his torso bare, looked at her with frank lust. "Tell me what you think about when you touch yourself," he said huskily. About you, Zoe replied, and her hand slid to the edge of her bra. About your hands, about your… What the hell is going on here? Trevor's voice rumbled like a gunshot. Zoe shrieked and turned around sharply. Her face reflected a whole spectrum of emotions: shock, fear, shame. She instinctively covered herself with her hands, as if she only now realized what she was in. Trevor, you were supposed to be at the meeting. Her voice trembled. Obviously, he replied icily. Otherwise, I wouldn't have caught my wife half naked in front of another man. Vincent on the screen looked equally shocked. Look, Mr. Riley, it's not what you think. Shut up, Trevor barked, and go to hell before I find a way to get to you through that damn screen. He slammed the laptop lid shut with such force that it nearly cracked. There was a heavy silence, broken only by Trevor's heavy breathing and Zoe's quiet sobs. Trevor, I can explain, she finally uttered, hastily pulling on the t-shirt that lay beside her. Explain what? His voice was ringing with restrained rage. How you're virtually fucking your boss, or how you've been lying to me this whole time. It's not sex, we were just talking. In your underwear? Seriously, Zoe, what do you take me for? Trevor felt something inside him break. The pain was physically tangible, as if someone had stuck a knife between his ribs and was twisting it through. How long has this been going on? Zoe lowered her head. 3 months. 3 months, he repeated in a lifeless voice. 3 fucking months you've been leading me around by the nose. What was I supposed to do? Zoe suddenly erupted. You've been so busy with your work, your ambitions. When was the last time you asked me how my day was? When were you interested in what was important to me? Don't shift the blame! Trevor pounded his fist on the wall in fury. I worked like hell to provide for us, so you could afford to do what you love, not take whatever orders you wanted. I didn't ask you to sacrifice our relationship for money. What did you ask for? For me to turn a blind eye to your affairs? Zoe stood up abruptly, her face contorted with anger. There was nothing between us. Physically, nothing. Yes, we flirted, we exchanged fantasies, but I never cheated on you. That's what cheating is, Zoe. What I saw is cheating, maybe not physical, but that doesn't make it any easier. She shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. You don't understand. He listens to me, really listens, interested in my thoughts, my feelings. When we talk, I feel alive. And with you, I feel like a ghost in my own house. Trevor leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling weak in his legs. Somewhere deep inside, he knew there was some truth in what she said. He had indeed become distant, immersed in his work, in the pursuit of success. But did that justify betrayal? You could have talked to me, he said quietly. Told me you lacked attention, that you were unhappy. I tried 1,000 times, but you were always too tired, too busy, too immersed in your own problems. And instead of insisting of getting my attention, you ran to the first man who complimented you? That's not fair. Zoe shook her head. Vincent didn't just compliment me. He noticed me, saw my talent, my abilities, appreciated my ideas. And I wasn't appreciative then? When was the last time you took an interest in my work? When did you ask about my projects? To you, everything I do is just a hobby, a way to occupy your time while you make real money. Those words hurt deeper than Trevor had expected. He really hadn't paid much attention to Zoe's career, seeing her freelancing as something temporary, not serious. But did that excuse her behavior? And yet, he said, trying to speak calmly even though everything was boiling inside, you lied to me. Lied to my face, made a fool of me. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, and I would have kept on if I hadn't come home sooner. Zoe was silent, head down. Her shoulders slumped and she looked small and defenseless. Part of Trevor wanted to hug her, to tell her that everything would be okay, that they'd make it through this. But the other part, the part that bled with betrayal, couldn't forgive so easily. Do you love him? He finally asked, afraid to hear the answer himself. Zoe raised her tearful eyes to him. I don't know. I'm confused. He makes me feel things I haven't felt in a long time, but it could just be infatuation, the euphoria of newness. And me? Do you still love me? Her silence was the answer. Trevor felt something finally snap inside. 6 years of marriage, all the hopes and dreams, It was all crumbling before his eyes. "I can't take it anymore," he finally said. "These lies, this tension. I deserve better." "Trevor, please." Zoe took a step toward him. "Let's talk. Really talk. Like we used to. Maybe we can fix this." "Fix it? After what I saw? After you admitted you didn't know if you loved me?" "I'm confused, but that doesn't mean I don't want to fight for our marriage." Trevor shook his head. A sudden weariness swept over him, a weariness so deep it seemed to penetrate all the way to his bones. 6 years. 6 years of hopes, of plans, of living together, all for this moment. "I need to think," he said at last, "to clear my head. I can't be around you right now." He turned to leave, but Zoe grabbed his arm. "Don't leave like that. Please. I'm afraid that if you leave now, you won't come back. Or maybe you should be." He released his hand. "Maybe we're both better off apart." "You can't just cross out 6 years like that." "I'm not the one who crossed it. You're the one who made the choice." Zoe froze as if from a slap. "So that's it? You won't even try?" Trevor closed his eyes, trying to control his emotions. Anger, hurt, frustration, all mixed into a toxic cocktail poisoning every cell in his body. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Right now, I'm not even sure I can ever trust you again." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to spend the night at Dexter's, and then tomorrow we'll decide what's next." He left the room, leaving Zoe in tears. Walking down to the first floor, Trevor headed straight for the bar. His hands shook as he poured himself a whiskey. Taking a big gulp, he felt the alcohol burn his throat. But even that couldn't dull the pain of betrayal. His gaze fell on their wedding picture on the mantelpiece. So happy, so in love. When had it all gone wrong? At what point had they ceased to be the couple in the photograph? He finished his whiskey in one gulp and headed to the bedroom to pack for a sleepover at his friend's house. As he passed Zoe's office, he heard her quiet sobs. Part of him wanted to go back, to comfort her, to try to understand. But the other part, the part that bled from betrayal, couldn't forgive so easily. In the bedroom, he opened the closet machine and began gathering the essentials. T-shirt, jeans, toothbrush. His gaze fell on a small safe hidden in the back of the closet. It held his gun, a Glock 17, which he had bought 3 years ago for self-defense after a series of robberies in their neighborhood. Zoe had been against firearms in the house, but he'd insisted, convincing her it was a necessary safety measure. Trevor froze, looking at the safe. A strange thought flashed through his mind. What if he took the gun? Not to use it, of course, just in case. Not much could happen when you found out your life had been built on lies. He pushed the thought away. No, that's crazy. He just needed time to cool down, to think. It had nothing to do with the gun. And yet, already closing the closet and heading for the exit with a small bag in his hand, Trevor couldn't get rid of the annoying thought of how easy it would be to end this pain. Not his own. This situation. This humiliation. This betrayal. He slowly made his way down to the first floor where Zoe was waiting for him, sitting on the bottom step of the stairs. Her eyes were red with tears, but her gaze was determined. "Don't go," she said quietly. "Let's talk. Really talk." Trevor hesitated. Part of him wanted to stay, to listen, to understand, to try to save what could still be saved. But the other part, the part that was hurt to the core, longed for only one thing, to run as far away from that pain as possible. "Do you really think talking is going to change anything?" he asked finally. "I don't know," Zoe answered honestly. "But 6 years of marriage deserves at least a try, doesn't it?" She held out her hand, and after an agonizing pause, Trevor dropped the bag to the floor. Maybe she was right. Maybe they do need to talk. Really talk. Maybe for the first time in months. But the image of Zoe in lacy lingerie in front of the screen, her intimate laughter meant for another man, all of it kept standing in front of his eyes, poisoning every thought of a possible reconciliation. And somewhere in the back of his mind, like an annoying whisper, was the thought of the gun in the safe. A simple solution to a complex problem. About how one shot could end this pain. Trevor took a deep breath, trying to push those thoughts away. No, this isn't a solution. This is insanity. They just need to talk. Figure out if there was still something worth fighting for. or if their story had come to its logical conclusion. "Okay," he finally utters. "Let's talk." They sat across from each other in the kitchen, 2 cups of cooling tea between them. 5 hours. 5 hours of uninterrupted conversation. Accusations, excuses, tears, yelling. All the emotions they'd been holding back for months had finally burst out. Trevor felt drained, devastated, but strangely intoxicated. It was as if the poison that had been building up inside was finally starting to come out. "I never meant to hurt you," Zoe repeated for the 100th time. Her eyes were red with tears, her voice hoarse. She looked exhausted, but still beautiful. That fact made Trevor even angrier for some reason. "But you did," he replied, clutching his mug to his white knuckles. "You betrayed our marriage, you betrayed me, and you betrayed our relationship when you stopped noticing me, when your job became more important than me." Trevor shook his head. They went in circles, going back to the same accusations. Zoe thought he'd emotionally abandoned her first, justifying his affair with Vincent, and he couldn't forgive her betrayal, regardless of the reasons. "Are you going to keep in touch with him?" Trevor asked. Zoe looked away. "We work together, Trevor. I can't just... This isn't about work. You know exactly what I'm asking." She was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. Trevor felt the rage boiling up inside again. After all this conversation, after 5 hours of figuring things out, was she still not ready to break up with Vincent? "You have to choose," he said, trying to speak calmly. "It's either him or me. There's no middle ground." "That's not fair, Trevor. You're giving me an ultimatum without giving me time to think." "And how much time do you need? 3 more months? 6? A year? How much longer do I have to be a blind fool?" Zoe jumped up, knocking over the cup. The tea spread across the table, dripping onto the floor. "You're insufferable! I'm trying to be honest, trying to find a way out, and all you do is push and accuse. What did you expect? That I would calmly discuss my wife flirting with another man?" "I wasn't just flirting. He understands me, appreciates my work, is interested in my thoughts." "And I'm not?" Trevor stood up as well. "I supported you in everything for 6 years. When you quit your stable job to freelance, who paid the bills? Who bought you a new computer for your design projects?" "Money! It always comes down to money! I didn't ask you to buy me expensive things. I didn't ask for a big house in an upscale neighborhood. I only asked for your attention, your involvement in my life." Their altercation was interrupted by the ringing of Zoe's cell phone. She glanced at the screen and, to Trevor's fury, dropped the call with a touch of a trembling finger. "Is that him?" Trevor asked, already knowing the answer. Zoe nodded without looking him in the eye. "I didn't answer." "But you wanted to." She remained silent, and that silence again was more eloquent than any words. The phone rang again. "Answer it," Trevor said icily. "If you feel like it, I'll listen to what he has to say." "Don't be silly. I insist. Let's hear what your precious Vincent has to say." Zoe hesitated, looking at the vibrating phone. Trevor could see the inner struggle in her eyes. Finally, she answered and put it on speaker. "Hello." "Zoe, thank goodness, I was beginning to worry." Vincent's voice sounded worried. "Are you all right? Your husband—" "He's here, Vincent. You're on speakerphone." A pause, then. "Oh, yeah, Mr. Riley, listen." "Shut up," Trevor cut him short. "I'm not interested in hearing your excuses. They're not excuses. I just want to explain." "Explain what? How you seduced my wife? How you both laughed behind my back?" "No one was laughing behind your back." Vincent's voice became firmer. "What Zoe and I have between us isn't just an affair. We truly understand each other." Trevor laughed, but there was no mirth in his laughter. "Of course. You've known her for, what, 3 months? And I've spent 6 years waking up next to her every morning. And yet she turned to me, not you," Vincent replied. And Trevor felt something click inside him, like a fuse had been blown. "Vincent, don't," Zoe said warningly. "No, let him speak," Trevor hissed. "Let him say whatever he thinks." "I don't think you deserve a woman like Zoe," Vincent continued, and his words were like a knife stabbing into Trevor's heart. "She's talented, smart, sensitive, and you treat her like a trophy wife, like a piece of furniture in your perfect home." "Vincent, that's enough!" Zoe exclaimed, but it was too late. Trevor was already heading for the stairs leading to the second floor. It was as if something had switched in his head. All the emotions, hurt, resentment, anger, fused into one heavy, fiery feeling that pushed him forward. "Where are you going?" Zoe asked fearfully, but he didn't answer. Running up the stairs, Trevor headed straight for the bedroom closet. His hands acted on their own, as if controlled by some outside force. Dial the code for the safe, open the lid, pull out the gun, check the magazine, pull the bolt. As he walked back downstairs, he could hear Zoe continuing her conversation with Vincent, no longer on speakerphone. "I don't know what to do. He's furious and I'm scared." Seeing her husband with a gun, she froze, eyes wide. The phone fell out of her hand, hitting the floor with a thud. The screen remained on, and Vincent's voice continued to come from the speaker. "Zoe? What's going on? Zoe, are you here?" "Trevor, what are you doing?" Her voice shook. "Putting an end to this farce," he replied, surprised at how calm his voice sounded. There was a storm inside, but outside there was an icy calm. "Trevor, this is madness. Put the gun down. Let's talk." "We've already talked for 5 hours. And what did we come to? You still can't decide between me and him." "It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple, Zoe. It's either him or me." Vincent's worried voice came from the floor. "Zoe, what is it? Why aren't you answering?" Trevor bent down and picked up the phone. "Do you hear me, you bastard? I'm here. And I'm not going to be a cuckold anymore." "Trevor, calm down." Vincent's voice sounded strained. "Let's talk like adults. No one wants anything bad to happen. You ruined my family, took my wife away from me, and now you're talking about adult conversation? I didn't take Zoe away from you. She came to me on her own because you'd been neglecting her for a long time." Those words were the last straw. Trevor threw the phone against the wall with such force that it shattered into pieces, then turned to Zoe, pointing the gun directly at her. "Trevor, no!" She raised her hands in a protective gesture. "Think about what you're doing." "I've already made up my mind," he replied, and at the same moment a gunshot rang out. Zoe collapsed to the floor, clutching her head. Blood instantly flooded her hair, streaming down her face. Her eyes, wide with surprise and pain, met Trevor's for a split second before the light went out. Trevor stood, unmoving, looking at his wife's motionless body. The gun was still clutched in his hand. He couldn't believe what had just happened. How could he have pulled the trigger? Did he really want to kill her? There was no time to think. The realization hit him like a hammer. Zoe's dead. He killed his wife, and now he was facing life in prison. Panic gripped Trevor. He had to do something, run, hide. But first, he had to cover his tracks. He looked around. He had to make it look like a robbery. Quickly, concentrating, as if by instruction, he began to act. First, the drawers. He pulled out all the drawers of the dresser in the living room, dumped their contents on the floor. Then he knocked over several chairs, broke a vase, went through the closets on the first floor, scattering things, creating chaos. On the second floor, he headed straight for his and Zoe's bedroom. A jewelry box stood on the dressing table. Trevor shook out its contents, selected the most expensive, the diamond earrings he'd given Zoe for their 5th anniversary, a platinum necklace, a pair of gold bracelets, and slipped them into his pocket, scattered the rest on the floor. Then he opened the cash drawer. There were about $5,000 in there, their combined savings for a rainy day. Trevor took it all. There was one final touch. He went back to Zoe's body and removed her wedding ring and diamond engagement ring from her hand. He put those in his pocket too. His gaze fell on the gun he still clutched in his hand. Evidence. Need to get rid of it, but first, wipe off the prints. He wiped the gun carefully with the edge of his shirt, then laid it next to Zoe's body, as if she were trying to defend herself against a robber. Time was running out. Vincent had probably already called the police. He needed to disappear before they arrived. Trevor quickly went up to the bedroom, grabbed his gym bag, and threw in a few essentials. A change of clothes, shaving supplies, a phone charger. Then pulled his passport out of his desk drawer and added it to his belongings. One last look at the house that had still been his fortress, his safe haven, until this morning. Now it had turned into a crime scene. Trevor walked out the back door without locking it behind him. He made his way to his car, parked 2 blocks away at a brisk pace, constantly looking around. It seemed that all the neighbors were watching him from their windows, that every passerby knew what he had just done. As he got behind the wheel, he stood still for a moment, breathing deeply. His hands were shaking, his heart was pounding like crazy. A killer. He had become a murderer. There was no way that fact was settling in his mind. The first thing Trevor did was go to the ATM. He withdrew the maximum daily amount from his card, $5,000. Then he went to the joint account with Zoe and withdrew another $7,000. He didn't throw the cards away. They could still be useful until they put out a bolo and blocked the accounts. Dexter's auto shop was next, the only person he could trust right now. Dexter was in his office, sorting out paperwork. When he saw his friend, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Trevor? What's wrong? You look like a ghost." Trevor locked the door behind him and sank into a chair. He was shaking. "Dex, I've made a mess of things. Very serious stuff." "What happened?" Trevor told him everything. About how he'd found out about Vincent, about the fight, about the gun, about the shooting, about how he staged the robbery and got away. Dexter listened in silence, his face growing darker and darker. When Trevor finished, he was silent for a long time, pondering what he'd heard. "You realize they're going to be looking for you," he finally said. "The police are probably at your house by now. They'll quickly realize it wasn't a robbery." "I know. That's why I need to disappear." "Where are you going?" "Thought I'd head to Mexico. From there we can move on to South America." Dexter shook his head. "It's dangerous to cross the border right now. As soon as they put out a bolo, they'll take you right away." "What do you suggest?" "I have a cabin in the mountains, in the Ozarks. It's out in the middle of nowhere. No neighbors for miles around. You can crash there until you decide what to do next." Trevor nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Dex. I don't deserve a friend like that. You have to realize you can't hide forever. Sooner or later, they're going to find you." "I know, but right now I need time to think, to decide what to do next." Dexter wrote the address of the cabin on a piece of paper and drew a diagram of the driveway. "The key is under the 3rd step of the porch. There should be enough food supplies to last a couple weeks. Firewood in the shed behind the house." "Thanks, brother. I owe you one." "Let's not do that. Just take care of yourself and keep your phone off. They can trace it." Trevor nodded, shook his friend's hand, and walked out. Getting into his car, he noticed a police car driving by and instinctively ducked down. Too early for a search, but still scary. He drove out of town on secondary roads, avoiding the surveillance cameras on the main highways. The journey to the Ozarks would take about 4 hours, enough time to think about a plan of action going forward. Meanwhile, at the Riley house, police work was already simmering. Patrolmen were the first to arrive on the scene, summoned by an alarmed Vincent Marsh, who had reported an armed threat. They discovered Zoe's body and immediately called detectives. Detective Nicole Cheng arrived on the scene 40 minutes after the call. With an experienced eye, she immediately determined that the so-called robbery was staged. Too theatrical, too obvious. She carefully examined Zoe's body, noted the position of the gun, interviewed the first arriving officers, then contacted Vincent Marsh, who recounted his conversation with Zoe and Trevor, how he'd heard the threats, how the connection had dropped after a loud bang, how he'd tried to call back and, unable to get through, had called the police. "You mean you didn't hear a gunshot?" Detective Chang clarified. "No, the connection was broken before that. The phone must have shattered when Trevor threw it." "But you heard threats? Specific death threats?" He was furious. Said something like, "I'm going to put an end to this farce." And he had a gun, Zoe told me about it. Detective Chang recorded the statement and moved on to the next logical step, locating Trevor Riley, the prime suspect. A check of his bank transaction showed that he had withdrawn cash just after the alleged time of the murder. His cell phone was turned off, no location could be determined. The car was missing from the garage and driveway. "Put out an APB on Trevor Riley," Detective Chang ordered her assistant. "Check the security cameras at the main exits out of town, and contact the Border Patrol. He may be trying to leave the country." The investigation moved swiftly. Trevor's prints were found on the gun, though it was obvious someone had tried to rub them off. Ballistics testing confirmed that it was the gun that fired the shot. Interviews with neighbors revealed that in recent weeks, there had been frequent sounds of arguments coming from Riley's house. Gradually, a picture of the crime was formed. The husband, who learned of his wife's infidelity in a fit of jealousy, kills her, then staged a robbery and escaped. By evening, the police already had a full description of Trevor Riley. His photos were sent to all police departments in the state and neighboring states. Cameras captured his car on the way out of town, heading west. Detective Chang decided to look into Trevor's connections. Who could have helped him get away? Checking phone contacts, social media, interviewing co-workers, everything pointed to one person Trevor was particularly close to. Dexter Walsh, owner of a car service, childhood friend. Chang went to the auto repair shop, but Dexter had already closed it and gone home. She decided to visit him in the morning. In the meantime, Trevor had already made it to the cabin in the mountains, a deep, secluded place, perfect for hiding out. He found the key under the step, just like Dexter had said, and stepped inside. The cabin was simple but cozy. One room with a kitchenette, a small bedroom, a bathroom, a stove for heat, kerosene lamps, and a supply of canned goods in the closet. Trevor threw his bag on the floor and collapsed into a chair. Only now, in the silence and solitude, he allowed himself to realize the full horror of what had happened. Zoe was dead. He had killed her. With his own hands, he had killed the woman he had once loved more than anything in the world. The image of Zoe lying in a pool of blood with empty eyes haunted him. He couldn't understand how it had come to this. How had an ordinary argument turned into murder? At what point had he lost control, crossed a line from which there was no return? Tears streamed down his face. Trevor didn't try to hold them back. What did he have left? A life on the run? Prison? Suicide? He pulled out his cell phone. Despite Dexter's warning, he needed to find out what was going on. Turning it on for a couple minutes, he quickly checked the news sites. The murder had already made local headlines. Man killed wife and staged robbery. Jealous husband on the run after murder. Police are searching for Trevor Riley, suspected of killing his wife. His picture was everywhere. A description of the car, pleas for the public to report any information on his whereabouts. Trevor turned off his phone and tossed it on the table. He was now officially a fugitive, an outlaw. He realized he couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, he would be found. The only question was what would happen first, his capture or his ultimate collapse under the weight of guilt and remorse. At dawn the next day, Detective Chang knocked on the door of Dexter Walsh's house. The man opened, sleepy and anxious. "Detective Chung, Springfield Police Department," she showed her ID. "I have a few questions about Trevor Riley." "Trevor? What about him?" Dexter feigned surprise, but Chang was too experienced not to notice the falseness in his voice. "Mr. Walsh, are you aware that Trevor Riley is wanted on suspicion of murdering his wife?" "What, Zoe's dead? And you think Trevor?" "No, that's impossible. He loved her." "When was the last time you saw Mr. Riley?" Dexter blanched, and that was enough for Detective Chang. "Mr. Walsh, harboring a criminal is a serious offense. If you know where Trevor Riley is, you'd better tell me now." Dexter hesitated, but then his shoulders slumped. "He came in yesterday, was in a terrible state, said he and Zoe had a fight but didn't talk about the murder." "Where was he going?" "I don't know. I really don't. He was in a panic, said something about Mexico." Detective Chang stared intently into Dexter's eyes, trying to determine if he was lying. Her intuition told her he was, but there was no proof. "If he contacts you, let me know immediately." She held out her business card. "It's in Trevor's own best interest. The longer he's on the run, the worse it is for him." Dexter nodded, took the card, and closed the door. As soon as the detective left, he rushed to the phone, needed to warn Trevor. But Trevor wasn't answering. His phone was turned off, and 3 days later, the state police found Trevor's car abandoned in a motel parking lot, 60 miles outside of Springfield. The desk clerk recognized him from a photo. Yes, the man had rented a room, but had already moved out. A search of the immediate area yielded no results. A week passed. Detective Chang continued her investigation, gathering evidence against Trevor Riley. She interviewed everyone the couple knew, going over their financial history, correspondence, phone records. Dexter Walsh was under surveillance, but he wasn't doing anything suspicious. No trips to the mountains, no unusual calls or purchases. Another 3 days later, there was a breakthrough. At a gas station in the mountains, a camera caught a man who looked like Trevor. He was buying provisions and filling up an old pickup truck, clearly not his car. Police combed the area, and soon one of the search teams located Walsh's cabin. Surrounding the structure, the officers prepared to make an arrest. "Trevor Riley, this is the Springfield Police Department speaking. Come out with your hands up," came a voice over the loudspeaker. The lights in the cabin went out. Nothing happened for a few seconds, then the door slowly opened. Trevor appeared on the threshold, pale, gaunt, with stubble on his face. He held up his hands and slowly stepped out onto the porch. "Get down on the ground, hands behind your head," the officer commanded. Trevor obeyed without resistance. As he was handcuffed, he stared blankly into nowhere. Detective Chang approached him as he was already being lifted to his feet and led toward the police car. "Trevor Riley, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Zoe Riley. You have the right to remain silent." "I know the rights," Trevor interrupted her quietly. "I won't deny it. I killed her." At the police station, Trevor made a full confession. He recounted the events of that day in detail. His wife's infidelity, the argument, how he'd gotten the gun, how he'd shot her in a moment of passion. He did not hide the attempt to stage a robbery and his escape. "I didn't plan to kill her," he told Detective Chang. "I don't even remember pulling the trigger. It just happened as if it happened on its own. But you threatened her with a gun," Chang observed. "Why did you pull out a gun in the first place?" Trevor shook his head. "I wanted to scare her. I wanted her to feel some of the pain she'd caused me, but I never wanted to shoot." The prosecutor charged Trevor with second-degree murder, taking into account the state of affect and lack of prior intent. The trial was quick. Given the defendant's confession, the jury didn't have to deliberate long. Trevor was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Vincent Marsh was present at the sentencing hearing. As Trevor was led out of the courtroom, their gazes met. In Vincent's eyes was a mixture of anger and satisfaction. In Trevor's eyes, only weariness and humility. Trevor had had a lot of time to think in prison. He often thought about how one wrong decision, one moment of loss of control, had ruined not only his life, but had cut short the life of the man he had once loved more than anything else in the world. Dexter visited him once a month. Although the police suspected him of being an accessory, they couldn't prove anything and no charges were filed. "How are you?" he asked on each visit. "Living day to day," Trevor usually answered. "What else is left?" In his 3rd year of incarceration, Trevor began participating in the prison's rehabilitation program, working in the library and attending group therapy. Psychologists noted his sincere remorse and desire to make sense of what had happened. By his 5th year, he began helping other inmates with anger control, telling his story as a cautionary tale. "One moment of rage can turn your whole life around," he said. "And not just yours." Detective Nicole Cheng sometimes visited him too. It was unusual. Detectives rarely keep in touch with criminals after a case is over. But in Trevor Riley's case, she felt that this wasn't a hardened criminal, but someone who had made a terrible mistake in a moment of extreme emotional stress. "Why do you come?" Trevor asked her one day. "To remind myself that the line between the average person and the criminal is thinner than most people realize," she replied, "and that the system should not only punish, but also rehabilitate." After 10 years of impeccable behavior, Trevor became eligible for parole. The board deemed his remorse sincere and his risk of recidivism minimal. The day he was released, Dexter was the only one to greet him. His friend had aged, gray in his hair, but his smile remained the same. "Where to now?" he asked as they got into the car. "I don't know," Trevor answered honestly, "but not to Springfield. Too many memories." He moved to a small town in a neighboring state, got a job at the local library, quiet, peaceful, a far cry from the stress of his former corporate life. He rented a modest apartment, got a cat. He didn't tell anyone about his past, though sometimes he could see the recognition in some people's eyes. His story had once made a lot of noise and was all over the news. Once a month he went to Zoya's grave. He brought her favorite flowers, lilies, stood in silence, remembering not the last terrible day but the happy moments of their life together. One day he met Vincent Marsh at the cemetery. He too was bringing flowers to Zoe's grave. They nodded to each other in silence and parted without a word. What was there to say? Both had lost the woman they loved, one forever, the other before they could truly find her. A year after his release, Trevor began volunteering with troubled teens. He told them his story, warned them against rash actions, and taught them to control their emotions. One moment of anger can cost a lifetime of happiness, he told them, and I don't want any of you to repeat my path. The work gave him meaning, a sense that his tragedy could help prevent other similar stories. It didn't atone for his guilt. Nothing could bring Zoe back, but perhaps it saved others from the same fate. Time passed. Trevor Riley gradually built a new life, not as bright and successful as before, but peaceful and filled with small joys. He learned to live with guilt, though it never completely let go of him. The day he turned 50, he received a letter from Zoe's parents. In all these years, they had never once contacted him, refused to even come to the trial. The letter contained only a few lines. "We can never forgive you for taking our daughter from us, but we have heard about your work with teens, how you use your story to prevent tragedies like this. It's not redemption, but it's something, and Zoe would probably approve." Trevor stared at the letter for a long moment, and then he cried, for the first time in years. Not from grief, not from guilt, but from the feeling that maybe there was some meaning in this tragedy, that his story could save someone from making a similar mistake. He never remarried, never built another serious relationship. His companions were books, work, and the memory of the woman he loved and lost through his own fault. Every year on the anniversary of the tragedy, he lit a candle and spent the evening in silence, remembering Zoe. Not the Zoe he had seen on the last day, but the Zoe he had met at university, the one who had laughed so infectiously that it was impossible not to smile back, the one who had seen beauty in the little things and taught him to do the same. And each time, he made a promise to himself to keep telling his story, to warn others, to do everything he could to prevent similar tragedies. Because life is too fragile and too precious to be destroyed in a single moment of ill-considered rage.